Okay, I think we will get going while people are coming in because we have a pretty packed agenda today. So hello and welcome everyone. My name is Tahl Kestin and I'm the Network Manager for the Australia, New Zealand Pacific Regional Network of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, SDSN. It is my absolute pleasure today to welcome you on behalf of myself and my fellow organisers in ACTS and PRME to day 2 of the Regional Forum and Mainstreaming Education for the SDGs in Higher Education. I'd like to start our session by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands in which we all respectively meet from today and pay respects to the elders past, present and emerging. I'm joining you today from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kuala Nation down here in Melbourne. And I invite you all to use the chat to say hello and also to let us join us in acknowledging the country you're on. So our aim of this forum is to share inspiring examples of education for the SDGs from higher education institutions in our region and to share the opportunities as well as the challenges of scaling up action. Yesterday, we heard some fascinating examples of how institutions are working to incorporate education for the SDGs across the curriculum for a whole university and a whole discipline, and had a really interesting discussion with Education for Sustainable Development guru Jeff Scott about the global state of action in this area and priorities for moving forward. Some of the things that particularly stuck in my mind are Jeff's call to listen, link, leverage and lead for all of us. The notion that for SDG thinking around cutting across all the SDGs, the importance of collaborating across the sector and the need to address external accreditation requirements. And if people who joined us yesterday had any other takeaways that they would like to share, we'd really love to hear about them in the chat. Today we'll be picking up the discussion on a couple of these important themes, and in particular in session 3, just after our introduction, we'll be discussing how networks and cross-institutional collaboration can help us advance action in this area. And following this, in session 4, we will be hearing about new and transformative approaches to education for the SDGs that institutions are experimenting with. I'm really looking forward to these sessions because I know these are really interesting and inspiring examples. Talking about chat, we would really love you to use it to communicate throughout the forum. We had a great forum within a forum, as someone said in the chat yesterday, and I think this really helped all of us feel more connected as well as to learn much more. So please share any ideas, thoughts, questions, and initiatives that you're working on. Would really, I think everyone would love to hear those. You're also welcome to use the Zoom Q&A function to direct questions to the speakers. And then one last housekeeping matter before we move on. Unfortunately, the platform we're using, Zoom Events, did not record the email addresses for most of the people who registered. So if you would like to receive any follow-up information with things like the link to the recording or other follow-up information, summaries and stuff like that, you'll need to give us your email address and we'll post something in the chat, a link for you to do that in a minute. So welcome everyone again, and I'd like to first introduce Professor Usha Iyer-Raniga, who's a Director of ACTS and a Professor of Sustainable Built Environment at RMIT University, to give a brief welcome to today's session. Thank you. Go ahead, Usha.
Many thanks, Tahl. I'd like to start off by paying my respects to the Woiwurrung and Boonwurrung language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nation, on whose unceded land RMIT conducts its business, and also from the lands of which I'm speaking to you today. I think one of the really important takeaways in the session yesterday, and we had some really good discussions in the chat, was this has been highlighted in some of the recent international conferences as well, particularly the COP26, around the urgency. So we really don't have a lot of time. 2030 is not too far away. And I think as teachers, as educators, and as professionals working in the university sector, we owe it to ourselves to ensure that the next generation of decision makers, graduates that are going to be inheriting this planet, are armed with the tools and the knowledge that is really important for them to make decisions in their future. So while we might argue and say that, you know, we inherited a planet that has potentially got a lot of problems, I think if you look across the 17 SDGs, these problems and the approach to these problems are quite interlinked, and we need to do what we can from a moral and an ethical perspective to leave behind when we're no longer on this planet. As Tahl said, my role today is really as a director of ACTS, and I've certainly used the knowledge through the ACTS network as well as the other professional networks that I use, my academic networks as well, to try and bridge the gap between academia, community, and to try and bring in that level of engagement, which I think is really important, because you can't just research on sustainability, it has to be a place-based response. ACTS has been working in this space for quite some time, and ACTS has been assisting with this transformation for sustainability, not just in terms of accelerating education and running programs such as what you're in today, but also in terms of the engagement with communities and with students through a number of their programs such as LIFE or Green Star and so on. They also are responsible for running the Green Gown Awards Australasia, and of course those universities that win in these awards also move on to the International Green Gown Awards as well. So with that introduction, I would really encourage you to please use the chat function. We had some great discussions yesterday, and I look forward to today. So I'll hand you over now to Belinda. Thanks.
Thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks for that introduction. Hi everyone. Firstly, I am joining you today from the beautiful Dharawal country on Yuin Nation. And firstly, I would just like my respects to Aboriginal peoples past, present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal friends on the call today. As we come together for this first panel on sharing stories on how networking and cross-university collaborations can help mainstream education for the Sustainable Development Goals, may we always remember our connection to country and community and the critical importance of knowing and understanding the interconnectedness of not only us, but also with our country, which is and always will be the custodianship of our Aboriginal peoples. I am the outgoing chair of the Principles for Responsible Management Education Australia and New Zealand chapter, and I have had the honour of leading this network for the past 5 years. An incredible, passionate group of academics who are changing the game for business education across the world. We have had the pleasure of working with SDSN and ACTS on forums for the past couple of years, and the SDGs can only be achieved with collaborations of this kind, working together to develop and ideate for sustainable growth and development. Within the higher education sector, networks and cross-university collaborations are crucial to transformational change. We cannot make the significant changes by ourselves, and I am honoured to introduce a panel of passionate individuals who are representing larger initiatives that are changing the nature of the way that we work and how we work in our sector. I ask all my panel members I'm going to introduce them one by one. And first of all, I'm going to give them 5 minutes each to tell you about their initiative and what they're working on and about their network or their cross-university collaboration. And just to let them know, I'll turn my video back on at about 4.5 minutes, just so you kind of know that where we're at with our time level there. But on our panel today, we have Professor Michelle McLean from Bonn University, representing work as part of the Association for Medical Education in Europe. We have Shannon Kobran representing the SDG Academy and the lead of the Kuala Lumpur region. We have Dr. Robyn from Curtin University representing the Act for SDG initiative between Western Australia universities. And we have Dr. Melissa Edwards from UTS representing the Sharing Sustainability Education Initiative. So for our audience, I'm really looking forward to hearing about these amazing networks. Please share your networks in the chat. I think a lot of our challenges are knowing which networks are out there. There are so many. So if you can share them in the chat, that would be wonderful for our audience to hear all about them. And I might just kick off with Michelle, if that's okay.
Sure. Thank you, Belinda. So yes, from Bond University and working and living on unceded Kumbameri land. Very connected to the land here. My title, or the main gist of the presentation or the introduction I had to do was about the AME Consensus Statement for Planetary Health and Sustainable Healthcare Education. So AME is the Association for Medical Education. I've been working with that organization around sustainability. Initially was healthcare, sustainable healthcare education, but realized that it's a much bigger thing in terms of planetary health, and that's our broad consensus. We managed to bring together about 33 people across the world. We try to get different regions represented, so from Africa, from South America, from the US, Canada, the UK, and obviously Australia. We've got some students on board as well, and it's multi-professional. Physio, OT, a lot of medicine because I'm in that area, but it's a start. We can expand it beyond that. We've got dietetics as well. And so we have produced this AME Consensus Statement. It was in March last year that it was published. And it uses the SDGs as a framework for implementing planetary health in the curriculum. We have used some of the targets and indicators as suggested indicators down the track for accreditation. We've had lots of, I'm starting to get reviews for these 4 papers around climate change and planetary health, and it's good to see that the AME Consensus Statement is there. So that's an international one. From that, it led to the HALO. We set up a network on the Planetary Health Alliance HALO platform, where we can communicate conferences or talk about things and adverts for jobs and so on. It's a little bit quiet at the moment, but it is, people join and that is set up, so it's kept us in contact beyond this consensus statement. Then just locally, because I'm in medicine and there's nothing around environmental sustainability, environmental determinants of health in the current accreditation statements, we have worked with the medical deans as a working group on climate change and health to cosmetically change the old standards to add the environment as a determinant of health. But we've also put in multiple submissions, either individually or as a group, to the review of the standards. And in this is included the Indigenous voice. So in both profiles, the consensus statement, there's an Indigenous voice, and also you cannot separate planetary health from Indigenous wisdom, ways of knowing and being. And so my First Nation colleague and myself have personally submitted something along those lines. So in terms of the 5 minutes, that's probably enough to start the conversation.
Thanks so much, Michelle. A really great introduction into just collaboration and networking. And I love how, in particular, you mention it from a local, a national and an international level. I think that's crucial. It'd be quite interesting if that comes up from our other speakers today. I just can't imagine the work that has gone into, and the challenges that have gone into, agreeing on these consensus and what comes in and out of those. So I'm sure there's lots of questions around that, which hopefully we'll get time to pursue a little bit as we go. Lovely. Shannon, would you like to tell us all about your role and the SDG Academy?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Start my timer, make sure I don't go over. So I am Shannon Kobran. I lead the SDG Academy's office in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, although I before that worked in our New York office, and I'm originally from the US. So if you don't know the SDG Academy, we are the flagship online educational initiative of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, And if you don't know the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, or SDSN, they're a network or consortium of about 1,600 universities globally, universities, research institutions, other sort of knowledge generating institutions who are organized in regional or national networks to collectively pool their technical and academic expertise to support action on the SDGs, but understanding the local context. And of course, the SDSN Australia, New Zealand, and Pacific Network is one of the co-hosts of this event, and I think one of our more active networks, and they've done a lot specifically in the realm of education and sustainable development, so an excellent partner for this event. So that's sort of our broad organizational structure there. The SDG Academy was founded basically because we had access to all of these amazing minds all over the world working towards the SDGs in all of its different, all of their different facets. And we wanted to take that expertise and make it available to a public audience. Anyone who needs to know information about the SDGs, sort of broadly, what's the framework and how does it operate, or maybe more specific, like what is climate science and how do we know that climate change is happening, or what is human rights and why does it apply to my work? So we tapped into this expertise and we create free online courses that you can access on edX, which is one of the world's largest online learning platforms, to learn from experts on the SDGs from all over the world, all different aspects of sustainable development. So that's sort of where we started. That's our bread and butter. We also have something called the SDG Academy Library, where we take all of the video lectures. Yeah, Tahl is putting all of our links in the chat there for you. But our video library takes all of these amazing video lectures from these experts and makes them searchable, and that we found, and sort of independent video lessons or resources if you want to insert them into a classroom discussion or assign them as a reading, or use them in a workshop, or just share them with friends, family, or colleagues. So that is another resource that we've produced. And sort of beyond that, what we realized over the years was that there were a lot of mostly university lecturers, teachers of various sorts, who wanted to do more teaching about the SDGs, but didn't really know where to start, or weren't necessarily experts in specific, the SDGs are interdisciplinary, and maybe they had expertise in one area, but didn't know how to link it to another area in the ways that the SDGs ask us to. So we convened something that we call our community of practice. And this is a group of, I think now it's close to 50 different education institutions. And so that's mostly universities, but also nonprofits and some social enterprises who are doing education work, who want to figure out how do we use these free resources to extend our teaching about the SDGs, but also how can we learn from each other? Because what we found over the years is many of the partners that we are working with are coming across the same challenges, mainly academic and disciplinary silos, and how do you break down some of those bonds? And also, you might be the one SDG champion in your university, but it's hard to convince your colleagues to change their syllabi and change their teaching practices. So what we really wanted to do was convene a community of people to share resources, discuss resources, learn how to use the resources that we've created, but then also just share best practices with each other. So I think I will stop there, and I'm looking forward to learning more from the rest of you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing that, Shannon. I know the SDG Academy is bookmarked and I go there consistently. This space is a bit like Alice, yeah, it is like Alice in Wonderland. You can just wander and fall down a hole and you may never come up for 8 hours. And so I just love going in there and seeing what resources are available that I don't have to spend many, many hours or weeks trying to pull together. So yeah, it's an amazing centre. And I'm glad, thanks Tahl for popping all those links up there. We might just shift over to Robyn, if that's okay, and just hear about some cross-university collaborations and initiatives. Are you there, Robyn?
Yeah, sorry, I had to unmute and.
You're right, thank you.
Okay. Hello. Yeah, sorry, it took a while to join. I had problems with the ID and password. Anyway, I'm glad to be here now. First of all, I want to acknowledge the country. I respectfully acknowledge the Noongar Indigenous elders, past and present custodians, their descendants, and kin of the Waduk Noongar land upon which Curtin University Bentley's campus stands, and also the place in Waikamelli near Fremantle stands as well, where I'm at the moment, so I'm working from home. I respect the continuing culture and the contribution Waduk Noongar make to the life of the region. Now, I actually had a slide prepared. I don't know if Annette if you can bring that one up, because it summarizes really well the extent of our collaborations. Sorry, could I just check with you, Belinda? Can we get that slide up?
Yep.
It will take us a minute. Do you have it with you?
Yeah, I've got it as well. I can, yep, I do. So the only problem is sharing screens because I'm using two. I don't know if I'll try. So how can I'm not sure if I can, I'll just see if I can share screens. I don't think I've got the option because I'm only in as a visitor to actually share a screen. That's the only problem.
That's okay. I have it. It's just in this new platform.
Okay, great. Well, the initiative really for the SDG challenge, which targets postgraduate and undergraduate students across all 4 public universities at WA, came from, well, I mean, started from Murdoch University. They did it for their students, and we were so interested in their challenge and approached Murdoch and all the other universities and asked them if they're happy to take it further, and they have. So this is now the 3rd year in running. And so first year was just Murdoch's, and we've done it now twice as a combination of all 4 of us. Last year's challenge was, so what we do is we share, each university takes turn of who's going to be the host. So last year was Idis Cowan under Mehran. But having said that, it's very much a collaborative effort. So we pretty much do everything together. And I think what's worked really well too is that that's in terms of, looking at the strategies, barriers and what works, is we find that our regular meetings really help. So we tended to meet anything from, this is the 4 of us from each university, from fortnightly to monthly, but then fortnightly and then weekly during when the event is actually taking place. But I just wanted to illustrate with this slide, if you don't mind, if you can just cast your eye on it, because it really highlights the depth of it. Now, what we've done, we've each chosen to be the academic mentor for a particular SDG, and I'm the mentor for SDG 12, and it's reflective of our backgrounds. So I've got a marketing background and also teach sustainable marketing postgraduate unit. So I'm very well versed in that area. Donella oversees the decent work and economic growth from UWA, and Mehran looked at reduced inequalities, and Martin Bruckner, and also I should have actually put Leah Cap there too. She's the sustainable manager for Murdoch University, has also played a very active role. So I should have her name there. So apologies, I didn't put that there. I think it's very important, and she's been also offered a lot of logistics support. But you can also see that we've also had a whole stack of industry mentors. And this is again where we draw on our own networks. So you can see that we started off with trying to find several industry mentors for each SDG, but then I found, and then I think most of the others found, was apart from Martin for SDG 13, we found that having one sort of key industry mentor works better, because you can give them the support and you can really tailor the SDG challenge towards them as well, and work with them closely. You can also see that the teams that participated, what's really great to see, because we've always set out with the intention of groups forming across universities. And so each team has done so, as you can see, if you look at the spread of the teams. It's also great to see that each team has a combination of postgraduate and undergraduate students from a whole range of degrees, and also international students. And this is international students from Southeast Asia and from Dubai and India primarily. You can also see that from the titles, the different types of projects that they focused on. The winning team this year were the Waste Warriors, the Community Cow Project, which basically was entailed the strategy entailed having basically cows in suburb areas, and then so just a small number of cows that serve the local area, and then that milk that the cows produce goes to a fairly locally based but more central processing place, and then the cheese and the milk, pasteurized milk, etc., comes back to that. So it's very much community based. So it was a really interesting project. It was really good to see how the students actually really looked at all the different types of stakeholders and the barriers to make that actually happen. It was quite impressive. We don't have time to go into detail of the project. You can also see that we had other, in addition to the mentors, the academic and the industry mentors, we had a sustainability design workshop presenter, and then sponsors, etc. I mean, there's and the great thing was too that the actual winning team got presented at the United Nations WA Gala event as well. So it was a really lovely moment for them, and exposure really for us too. So for the event, it was very good, and hopefully that will continue that way. Sandy Chong also was one of the people giving a talk to the students as well. So she was in the closing in the fourth day of the event. So
thanks.
Anyway,
thanks for sharing, Robyn. I know it's such a massive project. I have attended for the last couple of years, and it's just incredible to watch how these universities, who in any other world would be competitors, come together and for just such an enriching student learning experience. And yeah, I just encourage you to look it up. I don't know, Robyn, if you have any links. I just don't have any for you that you could pop your story in the chat and people can contact you after, or if you have any questions, Robyn. Before we just get to a couple of questions for our audience, we're just going to hear from Melissa Edwards from UTS. Yeah, just about your sustainability education initiative, Mel.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, great.
Thanks. Fantastic initiative so far, and I'd like to thank everyone who's on the call today for being part of this session. I'm just going to speak very briefly to another kind of network platform, which is the sustainability.edu.au website. So this website originally was instigated from the Office of Learning and Teaching. The idea of the website then was to sort of act as a repository, and I think this is going back over a decade, when education for sustainability was sort of becoming or emerging more in terms of the mainstream. At that time, one of the things we realized was people have their very unique ways and quite contextualized ways of interpreting sustainability within their discipline or within their individual programs or subject areas. And so we set out through a kind of development of a community of practice approach to a website to enable people, Australian educators. So the idea is predominantly focused on Australian educators. If you're working within an Australian higher education institution, you can simply register on the site, you can create your own profile, and you have the capacity to be able to upload and share the very unique way in which you are integrating and embedding sustainability within your own courses, subjects, or particularly maybe a whole syllabus across a program of learning. The idea of that website then is you can either share that only to people who are also registered within the website itself, so that is other Australian educators, or you can make that publicly available so that anyone who visits the site can access and download those materials. And so the idea was to really foster a kind of open, free sharing, and also the capacity for people within the Australian education community to sort of see one another, to know who was active in the space and what their particular interests were, so that you have the opportunity to be able to reach out. And I know there's lots of other fabulous networks that have since popped up and are doing also very similar type initiatives. So the other aspect of this website was to also enable institutions, so individual universities, to sort of have their place, to have their presence within the site, and to be able to demonstrate and showcase what they were doing distinctively in the space of sustainability education across all of the various different disciplines, and to be able to enable that learning from one another to kind of reach some idea or platform where we might be able to collaborate together, and in that spirit of open sharing, lead us to some form of collaborative co-creation opportunities for curriculum. So now that this technology has evolved, and wonderful things like the SDG Academy that we just heard about previously exist, where similar type functions are available for educators to access materials. One of the things we're looking at doing with this website in the next period of time, and part of my call to action for people on this call today, would be to say, how can we more actively engage? And if we take some of the key messaging from yesterday's session, to really leverage those cross-institutional ways of thinking about the unique ways we engage in sustainability in our curriculum, and perhaps start to kind of co-create materials that are specific to the Australian context and our local situations and our various different disciplines. So I think that's all I'd like to leave as my kind of call to action at this point. And hopefully we can bring that further into the discussion today. Thanks.
Great. Thanks so much, Mel, for that. And Tahl's put a link up there to the site. So I guess I might just, if anyone's got any questions from our panel's members, please just pop it in the QA or the chat. I think, it's such an interesting area, and we talk a lot about, many of you mentioned, sharing, and in the spirit of open sharing, we know we need to do more of that. I guess my first question would be, in your experience, what has been the biggest enabler? Like, what is that thing that you go, we couldn't have done this without this? It's just like, where do people, what do we need, to not only just start these networks, but for them to be sustainable, I guess. Maybe I'll start with Michelle. I know, with your consensus statement, I can't really imagine the challenges that went with that, but what's your one thing, that enables you to be?
Yeah, so there weren't really challenges, because there were more enablers than barriers. The enablers were that these are committed people. These are people who, it's not only professionally committed, but personally committed to it. That you feel it in your heart, that this is important, that we need to be doing things so that we have a planet, and future generations have a planet. And so, it was like, no, we've got enough from that area. We can't have any more. So it was actually holding people off, because everybody wanted to be part of it, and it just kind of wasn't possible. And I guess it's also people who are prepared to step up and lead in this area. So, as I say, mine is working within medicine, but we talk about health professions education. So obviously SDG 3 is a big SDG for us, but climate action is so important, because healthcare has a big footprint. Australia per capita is one of the top 4 emitters from healthcare. So do no harm is a principle in medicine, but medicine delivery, healthcare delivery, is doing harm to the environment. So it's a catch-22. So if you're not personally committed to this and professionally committed, it's difficult. So we put two of us published a little paper called Eco-Ethical Leadership in Health Professions Education, which I'm also happy to share. And it just talks about the values that are needed, and maybe people who are active in this area have to actually become activists to get things done, because what is happening is the bottom up. It's being driven from the bottom up, not from the top down. We know that in Australia with the current government, no policies, and you compare that with the Climate Act in the UK 2008, where it says this is what will happen. So the NHS, that health system, has been working to reduce its footprint. So they're 10 years ahead of Australia. Australia's trajectory is like this to get to net zero in healthcare, but it's passionate people who drive it, who are personally committed.
No, I think you read some beautiful points there. Thanks, Michelle. So we've got commitment, step up and lead, our values and activism. Shannon, do you have any other attributes to add to that? This what keeps you together as a network?
I would definitely agree with everything Michelle said. I mean, particularly our community of practice would not exist without the people who stepped up and the people who were personally committed to integrating more SDG themes into their teaching. But I think in order for, our goal is to help them help the rest of their colleagues and the rest of their institutions and ultimately their students take these lessons to heart and learn. And I personally am very committed to the idea that the SDGs and sustainable development is truly interdisciplinary and should be integrated in every subject, even the ones that maybe aren't obvious. So the humanities, the arts, things that maybe aren't your immediate thought when you're thinking about what topics are related to sustainability. But I think in order for that to happen, and in order for our committed community members to make that impact, you have to have open-mindedness. People need to be willing to let go of the rigors of whatever discipline they're working in, and maybe experiment a little bit and accept the fact that these topics, for the very reasons we've been discussing, are relevant to everyone, because everyone is a citizen of the world. Everyone exists on this planet. So whether you are actively working in a sustainability related field, or you're just a concerned citizen, you need to know these things no matter what you're doing. So I think it takes a large amount of open-mindedness and willingness to change in order to have the scale of impact that we're looking for.
Thanks, Shannon. Robyn, I'm not sure if you have your camera on at all. Did you want to share just the biggest enabler for the cross-university collaboration?
Yes, I want to confirm too that, or certainly in our case too, obviously the commitment from each of the university PRME representatives played a huge role. And I think if you look at the makeup of who we are too, we have expertise in the area, we teach in the area, we engage in projects in our own universities. And so, and it's kind of, and I was asking myself, what actually made us collaborate? And it was, I think it's, well, Murdoch was really critical there, because Murdoch actually started the initiative, and when we approached them, they had a very open mind, and that was, I think, without that, it wouldn't have happened. And then something grew from that. We all took a leaf from that, and have been very committed since. And we can see that there, because especially from a sustainability perspective, it's about its collaboration is for the better for everyone. So even from a competitive perspective, it makes sense to collaborate, and not just for the common good, but for your own good as well. I think you end up providing a better service. But the other thing is, I think what's helped us, and this I've actually been collaborative in our nature. I've asked my colleagues to see what they thought their enablers are, and Maron said it was walking the talk and creating an online platform that enables students and representatives from industry and academia to work together towards developing practical and innovative solutions to sustainability challenges faced in society. So and that has been a challenge, and we're still trying to come up with a good platform, and we are getting better, and we're finding that online is actually really good. It works because we're collaborating across time and all that sort of thing. So we're going to stick online. I'm also, but we've got some ideas. I'm going to be convening it well, Curtin University is going to be the convener this year. So I'm going to bring in some new technologies, but so that's been very, very critical to having that platform, and then of course the logistics support as well for that. And then of course I think the point I made earlier too is staying in contact. So the 4 key clusters stay in contact regularly. So even when the event's not running, we will catch up monthly. Even for a short period. So I think that's critical to keep the momentum going too. But I also don't want to underestimate the support, Belinda, we've received from the PRME, globally, and the Australian and New Zealand chapter as well. That's been a real motivator for us too, because that was sort of in a way for the 4 universities a common ground. I
think that's a really nice point.
You guys play a huge role, and I'm absolutely totally grateful for it. And I think it's really good that through our challenge, students get to connect with you as well, because otherwise it's sort of, academics know about you, but it's the students then get exposure to you. So I really appreciate the time you put in the events as well, the welcome you provide and all that. So I think that's been very critical.
Thanks, Robyn. Yeah, some really great points there. Just might finish off. I know there's a couple of questions in the chat, and I'll probably get the panelists just to reply to those as we go throughout the morning. Mel, did you have anything else to add to that at all?
Well, look, I would completely support everything that has been said so far, and I think that particularly the commitment and the passion is always so surprising, and the ability for people to use their creative process as educators to find a way to feed into contributing to goals through the various different disciplines has always been something that I find really, really inspiring as an educator and researcher in this space as well. I would just enforce or stress here that, again, it's the platforms, right? And I think the sustainability.edu.au website had its greatest life and activity when we had dedicated people who were able to be resourced in a way that they had time. So community builders, people who are actively employed to build community. Communities are amazing things, and they're beautiful when people come together and everybody has their time and things to put in. But people are really, really busy. So in terms of just simply getting people to upload, your latest practice to the site and share it, it's not that people don't have good intention, but they just don't have time. So when we had a community manager and that person was working 2 days a week on, sort of generating activity within the platform, that's when we really saw that thing flourish and grow. So yeah, I would say institutional support is really, really important, some sort of backbone organisation. And finally, then the institutions themselves then actually stating that sharing and collaborating is something that they encourage people to do. And I know this myself as an educator, that certainly there is an intention for that to occur, but how is that actually incentivized? Many of us are incentivized on a very kind of individual basis, and that can create a kind of anti-competitive sort of barrier to collaboration. So how can we get institutions to collectively agree that this is something we want to see educators do, particularly on very critical issues like climate change? I would note that there's a bunch of, really high profile universities in Europe who've actually created their own platform where they are collaborating actively on materials and courses in this space. And I think that's a really good model that we might look at here in Australia at some point.
Thanks for that, Mel. Thank you so much, everyone. We've sort of run out of time. I know there was I would love all your thoughts if you get the chance. There was a question about, do you know any of the impact of these networks on students and their learning experience? So it'd be great if you could answer that in the chat. That would be wonderful. And I'm also just reading Jeff's comment about, doing a bit of a stock take and identifying all these amazing networks and communities of practice that are there. So thanks for that, Jeff. We'll have a look at that as well. Thank you so much. This is such a critical space and so much hard work being done. It's not easy what any of you amazing women are doing. And I just, applaud you and thank you for joining us today to sharing those experiences. I am just going to quickly hand over now to Annette for our next session. So Annette is the Associate Professor and Deputy Director of Education for Monash Sustainable Development Institute. And she's with us for a very short time today, and I know she's very busy, so I'm going to hand over to Annette. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Belinda. I'm actually here for a while, but we have a guest speaker that needs to go on time. So But first of all, I want to welcome everyone to the next session on implementing innovative educational programs in response to the SDGs and societal challenges. Before I start, I would also like to pay my respects, and I would like to do that to the people of the Kuala nation on which lands Monash University operates. As Belinda just said, my name is Annette. I'm Director of Education at Monash Sustainable Development Institute, and I've been involved for many years in the development and implementation of programs focused on addressing sustainable development. Our programs are both in the curriculum, in the co-curriculum space, and also we do quite a lot of professional development. When talking about transformative learning, there is still a lot to learn from us. While I think we agree that education for sustainable development, the goals, or ESD, needs new kinds of educational approaches, and we are making progress, we're also really trying to understand how we can do that best, especially if we think about how do we really generally collaborate, and how do we learn in interdisciplinary settings? How do we best address problem-based learning? How do we take opportunities to connect with and learn from other stakeholders? And another big one on how do we deliver this kind of education at a larger scale? So speaking from practice, these kind of initiatives can be challenging to set up within higher education institutes, how they currently organize and operate, but I also believe it can be done. And within this session, we will share innovative programs that take place within universities in our region and that have been developed to address education for the SDGs. We will explore what they're doing, how they create those programs, and so on. But first of all, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, and it's my colleague Sharon Pickering from Monash University. Sharon is our Deputy Vice-Chancellor in Education and Senior Vice-President. And Sharon is currently devising and implementing strategies to deliver to Monash Impact 2030, our new agenda, which clearly responds to societal challenges. So Shannon will set us off in this session, which is then followed by 4 panel statements. Sharon, I'd like to welcome you as our keynote speaker. I'm aware of your time constraints today, but I really hope we have got time for 1 or 2 questions at the end. So over to you.
Thanks so much, Annette, and thank you to all of you for this opportunity to talk with you. You may have noticed I was lurking in the background and I got to hear a number of the conversations that preceded this, and I was so impressed, and my warmest congratulations for all the work that so many people are putting in order to lead in this space. I'm talking to you today from the Monash Clayton campus in Melbourne. That means I am on the unceded lands of the people of the Kuala nations, and I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and of course I recognise the elders and traditional owners of the lands upon which wherever you may all be joining this call from today. So I'm delighted to be able to talk about something that I'm incredibly passionate about, and that is transformative education, and in particular some of the work that we've been doing that has really been driven by a commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals, and really asking the question of how do we achieve transformative student experiences that platform the SDGs, but to be frank with you, how do we do it at scale? How do we do it at the highest quality and at scale? Because here's my shtick, we ain't going to change the world 10 or 20 students at a time. Okay, we actually need to change it by the tens of thousands at a time. And therefore the opportunity when it comes to transformative education and SDGs is we've got to ask ourselves, how can we marry quality and scale? And the reason, and I think if I step back one bit before that, it's the question as to why we do this. And I'm just going to show you a little, this is why I do it. Okay, this is why I do it. This is the first cohort of students that we took on the Global Immersion Guarantee into Mumbai. where we partner with nearly 100 organisations from local community groups all the way through to government. And what actually this is about is saying that it is identifying the ways that immersive, transformative education experiences blow the mind of our students, but they're measurable. And we cannot measure the impact of transformative education if we're doing it 10 and 20 students at a time. We have to look at how we are educating a generation. So to me, and one of the most powerful things about going at scale is that you then actually have a data that speaks back. It speaks back about how all education needs to be transformative. So what we know from international education, for example, is once a student has undertaken an international education experience, invariably their grades increase, their sense of belonging increases, their retention increases, and their employability increases. Now, we all might, many of us who have been international students and had those experiences think, well, that's pretty self-evident. Well, it is not self-evident across the sector. Because what we've actually got has been an idea that immersive education, transformative education, even education on the SDGs is a cherry on the cake. My view is it is the cake. And we actually have to look at how we invert our entire educational model in relation to the way that we prioritise, the way that we fund, and the way that we realise these opportunities. And that's really important because if we're interested in transformative education, it cannot just be for those who can access it. And here what I'm actually talking about is if you look at international education, by and large, what you will find wherever you go, whatever studies that you look at, is that it is the students who have got means that take those educational opportunities up. So in terms of all those benefits I mentioned before, that becomes the reserve of those who are in a position to afford it. What I actually believe we need to do is we need to be developing up these high quality, scalable experiences that are actually inclusive. And that means they have to be funded. All right. That also means we have to shift the way that we think about rich educational experiences. And that is something that Monash has made an enormous commitment to in our most recent strategic plan that Annette referenced. So if we want to succeed, we actually have to take all of those programs that we know and love, and so many of us done it. I can't tell you how many of them that I've read that have had 20 and 30 and 40 students. And we have to ask ourselves, what do we need to do to run that to 1,000, to run that to 2,000? So the Global Immersion Guarantee that I'm talking about here, sitting just behind me, has already cracked 2,000 students in its first 2 years of running. Within 5 years, we should be well up over the 8,000 student mark, despite the pandemic. And what we're trying to do there is create generations of graduates who are capable of working across the region. And what's important to us in terms of these transformative experiences is that everything about this experience is about showing rather than telling. So I heard people referencing interdisciplinarity and collaboration. We have to not only teach it, we actually have to demonstrate it. So when we're actually talking about the SDGs and we're talking about immersive education, we're talking about transformative education, what our students need to see is us partnering as universities, with organisations. They need to see it live and in front of them, not on a PowerPoint slide. They have to see the way that we interact with social enterprises. They need to see the way that their own universities interact with government, with industry, with commercial, whatever array it might be. And I think that's actually a real challenge when you think about the ways that we have traditionally structured programs. We've traditionally structured programs as tell rather than show. And we've also traditionally structured programs in ways that have not been able to capture the student as a co-design partner in it. And that's what we want to be able to do, but we want to be able to do at scale. I also believe key to the point about it being inclusive means that we have to push much harder that these experiences are in curriculum. Because what all the evidence shows us is that as soon as you put things extracurricular, traditionally you get more barriers to students undertaking them from what we would call equity category backgrounds. When you're looking at students who are juggling part-time work, family responsibilities, all kinds of other things, if you're not in curriculum,
you're seen as optional. And when you're optional, you will not get the exposure to the full student body. And to my mind, when you look at the transformative power of immersive education, you want to be capturing all students. But of course, what you want to do is you want to capture those students you can make the most difference to. All the data shows us, and our own data in relation to global immersion here at Monash shows us that as soon as you put it in curriculum and it is fully funded, not only do you get higher rates of participation from students from what we would call equity category backgrounds, you actually then see that the difference it makes to things like grades and employabilities is even higher than non-equity category students. So what you're able to do is you're able to transform not just at scale, but you're actually able to transform for the groups that have actually been hardest to reach. And I think that's really important. I want to kind of return to that point that I made around the modelling of behaviour. So I actually think we need to also take a more radical approach to our curriculum and the way that we think about curriculum and the way that we model not only its build, but its execution for our students in terms of the partnerships that we form and how they are ongoing. So one of the things that's been really important to us is that when we look at these rich educational experiences, there are clear pathways for students to take next steps. That relationships are not transactional, that they are long-term. That there are, for example, internships, that there are other opportunities that then spring off the back of this to be able to maintain those relationships. In this picture here, there's a series of young people who, when they returned, so they were in Mumbai in the November. And one of the things that happened to them, which was quite incredible, I'm just doing this because this is about more than the consciousness of these young students. It's about more than their academic pursuits. It's actually about their development as human beings. And I think this story is quite significant. When we arrived in Mumbai, a young man spotted the Monash contingent arriving and he tracked us down. And it turned out he was a young man who had formed a relationship with quite a well-known Australian, well, down in these parts, an Australian rules footballer. And what he had done in one of the settlements was start up an Australian rules football clinic for kids, which those of us from Australia would know as AusKick. And he found us in Mumbai and he found our students. And he invited our students down on one of the afternoons that they had free. In fact, it was the only afternoon they had free because we do work them quite hard. They come down and he asked for their help in running this clinic. And of course, like most Australian kids, they'd seen AusKick done here where you might have a few dozen or a couple of hundred kids. About 1,000 kids turned up to this AusKick session. And so these Monash students helped him. As a result, now on January the 26th, which while on the one hand is still Australia Day, it is also India Republic Day, they now hold the Monash Cup where a team of Monash students compete against a group of local students. This is all very fascinating. You think, why is that important? Because the young man that ran that clinic had a tragic motorbike accident about 8 weeks after that group returned. And he was on life support and he needed significant funding to be able to undertake the series of operations for him to be able to make a recovery. The group of students in this picture in 48 hours raised the $26,000 to pay for his operations. Sorry, I'm a bit emotional. The relationships that these young people formed not only had, that particular impact, but what then happened is a number of these students went back and a number of our students now live and work in Mumbai. So the other piece we want to be able to do here is we are trying to form relationships between our students and communities. So this idea that you think about a university experience and an immersive experience in one way and you think about the development of young people another, we actually have an opportunity to bring these all together. That is what makes them transformative. And I noted, I heard a few comments before and I really want to endorse what was being said, and that is our institutions have to make commitments. Those commitments need to be big and bold and they need to be really serious if we are going to be able to realise what we all know. And that is that our university graduates have got the capability of being the greatest contribution that we make to the SDGs wherever we are in the world. They are likely to make a far greater impact than all other kinds of impacts that a university can make in that space. When we send out graduates, if we send out graduates not just with a sensibility, but equipped with a level of capability to work across a whole range of industries to advance the SDGs, we will shift the dial. But what that will mean is our universities must commit. Our universities must commit to being for purpose. But what's important is our students within their education have to have that opportunity to experience their education as being for purpose, not just for degree. Not for a moment do I expect my students not to want a degree from a top 50 university in the world. Of course they do. And we want to be able to provide a truly exceptional degree. But that's not all we want to do. We want a really strong sense in our student body that their education is for purpose, just like their university is for purpose. I have got my my 3-minute warning. I want to just say to you that there was every reason to believe that what we do in transformative education and what we do in relation to the SDGs could continue to be disaggregated. We could do it in, let's face it, dozens of ways across a university, but we would lose our potency. What we want to be able to do is offer an experience to our students that is in curriculum, is fully inclusive, and actually joins together a student experience that is more than anything we can put in a standard curriculum. So rather than telling students about the importance of interdisciplinarity, they actually have to live it. They have to problem solve for it, and they have to do it in a context where they are not in the cultural majority. I will leave it there.
Thank you so much, Shannon. Wonderful to hear the story. Thank you for putting this vision forward, and and thank you for sharing the photo and the actual story to put it in, to bring it alive. And I think you ask us a lot of different things to consider on scale, inclusiveness, the importance of curricula in this space, etc. That is really, that I think can also be challenging in certain ways. And I'm going a little bit in the discussion that I partly see coming in here, and that is, but what about the footprint? Now, being at Monash, I know that alongside this vision, many other things are being put in practice. Yeah. But what about the footprint? What about sustainability, etc.?
So we work with a range of programs to be able to sorry, a little thing just popped up. I wasn't sure whether I'd gone on mute or not. So we work with programs that look to fully offset all of the travel-related impacts. But what we've also done is we've also developed a virtual offering called the Social Enterprise Challenge in the Indo-Pacific. Just over 400 students have completed that within the first year of it being offered. So we do also have to look at alternatives in relation to that. So we do model that up, and we do make sure that we are operating at all times in line with absolute best practice in terms of the footprint of travel, which I absolutely take on board. Yes.
Thanks, Sharon. Tahl is asking, what advice do you have on putting something like this, when we talk about the scale, the importance of curricula, etc.? What advice do you have for other universities on this issue?
You won't go to scale if you don't go in curriculum. Okay, go in curriculum. You will not go to scale if you stick within one course or one faculty. So you have to look at offers that can be that are applicable across faculties. And I heard people talking about even being across universities. I think that is completely reasonable. But the most important thing is partnering for funding around these pieces for it to be inclusive, and that's really important. We've really worked heavily in relation to our philanthropic work to support this, and that's very important, is very important to me. So I think there are, you know, I'm sorry, I'm a social scientist from way back, so I always say it's structure, it's structure, it's structure, people. You've got to go to the structures. It needs to be in curriculum. It needs to have additional external funding. It needs to be interdisciplinary. So,
yeah, there is a comment, Sharon, and where someone says it's often picked up by sessionals. I think you addressed the financing part of it. I think
sessionals.
Yeah, in
Sorry?
the question and answers. Someone is asking, maybe it's too political, but how do we actually offer these rich experience in enriched curriculum when we're also bound by such tight funding and with so many casualized staff expected to pick up these role on a sessional basis?
Yeah, in the programs that I run, we don't use sessionals. And it's not that I don't believe sessionals are fully capable, absolutely, but that's why they're in, you know, it's in curriculum. This is part, and that's why it has to be part of an institutional commitment. It has to be properly funded, and therefore you also want your leading educators. And not that sessionals can't be leading educators, but I only send my very, very best educators in relation to this, in terms of the curriculum build, in terms of the asynchronous, in terms of the actual study tour piece. We always use our fixed term or ongoing members of staff, because educating in this environment is actually much harder than a traditional academic environment, because you are working with all of these multiple stakeholders, and you're not just the educator, you're the subject. Because if you are live collaborating and you are showing how these relationships work, at the one time you're trying to teach, but at the other time you're basically exhibit A. Okay, so you actually have to have your very best. And one of the things that I'm pleased to say is each year, you know, we do full evaluations and all the rest of it, and I always actually have some kind of celebration with our educators. What they tell me without hesitation is this is the best educational experience of their career. Okay, so it's not just transformative for students, it's transformative for educators. And that's really, you know, that's super important to me, because you want those people there because they're also invested in a different kind of educational offering.
Yeah, thanks. Sharon, in the last minute we have, I've just got a little bit of a different questions, because we are in an environment where there's a lot of uncertainty and ambiguity, and that's what we prepare our students for. But one of the questions that came in the chat is, how do we actually prepare our students to reflect and download what they learn, and that they have, I guess, a healthy engagement with what they see, what they learn and experience?
Yeah, so I think what's really important is, like most of these things, you have to have a really layered approach, because you're not just dealing about an academic experience. You know, you're talking about a personal experience. In many ways, you're talking about a political experience. And so what you want to be able to support our students across all of that. So to give you an idea, that while this is a scalable program, every group is never any bigger than 40. So for any student that's on this, they don't see it as like, oh my God, I'm one of, you know, hundreds. They think they're basically one of 40. So we always have an in-country coordinator, we will have a group leader, and then we will have 2 to 3, basically what we call pastoral supports. They are often, they're often early career academics. And often what we also do is engage with the doctoral students of some of our partners as well, who work with us. And that's actually been really fantastic. So I'll be straight with you, we overstaff this. Okay, so if you think about what you would usually put in front of a student in terms of educator to student arrangements, this is significantly overstaffed, in recognition that when you're undertaking these kinds of activities, it's 24/7. it's really immersive, and so you can't be doing, you know, bare bones approach, and that's part of that overall institutional commitment.
Okay, thank you so much, Sharon. Thank you for being here. I know there are big plans in the works as well, and I really look forward for all of us to hear more about this.
No,
thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, and I'm sorry I have to head off. But to all of those of you around Australia, but also around the world, and when we haven't had our students on campus, I want you to know that I'm just looking out my window right now, and we've got thousands of students back on campus, and it's totally glorious. So thank you so much. Bye bye.
Thanks, Sharon. Bye bye. Okay. Thank you very much, and I really hope that you have enjoyed the guest speaker as I did. Very, very bold in the vision, I think, for Monash, but also really practical in some things that we are, currently undertaking. So I really look forward now to hear from our panel speakers, who will be making short statements. And today we will be hearing from Niki from the University of Auckland, and she will be talking about the 3-course interdisciplinary sustainability module. We also will be hearing from Sebastian Cordobia from RMIT University, and who's also part of the International Federation of Social Workers as a UN representative. He will be talking to the SDG student placement model. From there, I would like to hand over to Karen McNamara, University of Queensland, and talking about the complexity, action, and sustainable future scores. And lastly, we hear from Nancy Huggett from the University of Wollongong, and about Global Climate Change Week at that university. And I look forward to having 5 short statements. That at the end we have got some time for questions and further panel engagement. So Niki, over to you.
Kia ora koutou, wonderful to be here, and a very inspiring talk from Sharon. So I'm just going to share a screen with you now, because one of the things I do want to show you is some of the student response to what we've been doing. So I'm at the University of Auckland, where one of our strategic objectives is leading transition to sustainable and abundant ecosystems. And we've thought through, as part of this process, what is the essence of sustainability teaching, education and experience in higher education, and come up with these 6 principles: intrapersonal competencies, learning about yourself; interpersonal competencies, learning how to work with others; critical thinking; empowerment, the sense that you can take meaningful action; understanding complexity and how physical and social systems work; and transdisciplinarity and problem solving across diversity. So we've got this 3-course module that's available to Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Science students, and there are courses designed for each year level. Sort of prototype student would do 1 a year, but actually they can do them individually if they've got enough credits from having been at university long enough to be eligible. And you can see them: sustainability in us, a sustainable community, and a sustainable world. Now, all the courses are solution focused, so they aim to teach students to use their skills, knowledge, interests and values to contribute to a sustainable world, and critically how to work with others on collaborative solutions to sustainability problems. And we try to step them up across the years. So Sustain 100 has a big focus on what each person can do, some background issues around history, consumption, kaitiakitanga, which is the Indigenous Māori notion of kinship and responsibility, although that's not quite right, for the natural world. The community is a focus of Sustain 200, so we talk quite a bit about the City of Auckland there, and then global approaches, including the SDGs and Sustain 300. Complexity runs through it all. Each course has a particular focal topic in which we bring in experts from the university and the community to discuss elements of it, and you can see the assessment below there. So the major project is probably the most innovative and exciting thing here, because students work together in these groups from across these two faculties to develop in the first year a game designed to promote sustainability, in the second year a proposal to green our campus, and in the third year, my favourite, they have to create a political party and become ministers of this and that and so on. And they also have to do an individual reflection, which helps create those intrapersonal skills as we go. So I'm going to show you now a couple of examples. This is an example from Sustain 200, a Greening Our project, and then we'll move straight on to a short video that shows what our students say.
Every year, thousands of recyclable containers like this one leave University of Auckland to go to the landfill due to incorrect disposal or contamination.
Our solution is a comeback container scheme.
The use of a CBC app and QR system will allow students to borrow these containers from participating food vendors.
These containers will be collected daily by employed students for sterilisation.
Our solution will reduce waste leaving UOA and will encourage students to become more conscious consumers.
Comeback containers.
For the planet.
For the people.
For the pocket.
Every year,
So here we will listen to what our students have to say.
What I enjoy about sustainability is that it's not like other courses where you're really just learning to pass an exam. In sustainability, you actually learn to become a better person of this world through environmental initiatives as a part of a society and also within the economy, which is really cool.
All the lecture content resonates with me, and every time I go home after uni, I think about the class and what I've learned and how I can change my own life. I even started my own veggie garden at home, so yeah, it's a pretty awesome class.
There's a lot of emphasis in terms of group work, and that I think is such an essential skill to have, because when you go in the real world, you always have to collaborate with people when you have to come up with a solution. This course is giving you an opportunity to actually, practice that.
Another aspect of the course is the game design project, where we have an assignment where we get into groups, basically design a sustainable game. And it's been really interesting learning about how games can really influence our perception on different ideas. This new generation coming through is really game focused. So if we all spent the right amount of hours playing the right games, we could really become experts in the field and work towards some sustainable solutions.
Looking at the way that we recycle and repurpose rather than just getting rid of products in our home. The Sustain courses has made me think about how much goes out into recycling and what we can do to prevent that from happening. Looking at what we need rather than what we want, and so just spending and being a more conscious consumer. I've been an educator for 15 years, and in that time, it's the first time I've been motivated to apply for the environmental educator role. And Sustain 101 has inspired me to apply for that, because I'm looking forward to making differences in our school and our learners impacting our environment.
Great, thanks very much.
Wonderful, Niki. Thanks so much for sharing that experience. And indeed, the projects look very fascinating, whether it's the game or establishing the political party. And the student initiatives, like at Monash we had the Bottle Cup, and here what I've just seen are fantastic ways to go forward. So thank you very much for sharing that experience. Sebastian, over to you.
Thank you, Annette, and thank you, everybody. Everyone can hear me okay? Wonderful. I'm just hitting the timer to make sure. There we go. Still the 5 minutes. I'm calling from Wurundjeri land, and I'd like to pay my respects to traditional owners, present and emerging as well. So I'll be talking about a partnership between RMIT University and the Australian Association of Social Workers, where we looked at developing an SDG placement model. So fundamentally, we wanted to incorporate the SDGs into the curriculum and try and do it in a way that wasn't like a brief summary, but actually at the core of practice, but also providing an opportunity for students to then work in industry and learn, I think, the specifics and some of the challenges around implementing the SDGs. So basically what it is, social work students in Australia, there's about 40,000 social workers globally and thousands of social work students. To become a social worker, you need to complete 1,000 hours of placement, so 2 500-hour placements. As part of that, we partnered with the Australian Association of Social Workers to develop SDG-focused placements. So for 500 hours in small groups of students, sort of between 3 and 5. The idea was that students in small groups spend those 500 hours working as part of the Australian Association of Social Workers to review the association's actions in relation to the SDGs and provide recommendations for future actions and the ability to implement those actions. We were basically basing it off the voluntary local reviews, so that we saw that at least governments were accountable at the High Political Forum. Cities were accountable through the voluntary local reviews, but non-government organisations seem to be a little bit sporadic. So we're trying to formalise and look at that. And we've been running it now every year since 2019. So in groups of students, they would come to the association, and initially for the first half, we'd use a studio design approach. So students were partners in developing how we go about this. But initially it was taking the 17 goals and 169 targets and even more sub-targets and looking at all the actions of the association. Then about the halfway point, a report is submitted to the association, which is actually being published on the association's website, showing how some actions are being met and others are not. The ones that were not, there's recommended actions that then the students implement. And that was basically the first way we did it. How it went, it was an incredible opportunity for students and for the organisation to just basically take time and to better reflect on their actions. At 500 hours, it gave students a significant amount of time to engage with the complexities of sustainability. What we wanted to move away from is the compartmentalisation of the goals, but also that social workers are very much part of the, I guess, the solutions or the action towards key goals, especially around quality, health and wellbeing and so forth, but not necessarily then about how that relates to, for example, climate action. So we wanted to better engage students for that. It allowed a wonderful amount of time and a significant scope of focus, and also because of the organisation's support and because of the willingness of the association again to engage with this, the ability for the students to actually take active participation in the direction. So of the ASW. So what it led to was that many goals were being met, especially around health and wellbeing. But in particular, climate action was something that the association had not focused on. Key recommendations which were immediately implemented by the association and led by students was the association declared a climate emergency, and this was done as a formal statement, partnering as part of the Climate Health Alliance, greater presence in the media over a few months as well. And also a significant change that came as a result of the internal advocacy is that from 2020, eco-social work, in particular around sustainability, is now part of the accreditation process for social work courses. And we're talking about tens of thousands of students across Australia. Where to from here? Ideally, we're now looking at this as potentially a model for all NGOs. It really allowed to bring together what actions the ASW as an NGO was engaging in, but bring it in line with the language and terminology of the SDGs. Students found it incredibly rewarding. We co-wrote and published a journal article which I can provide the link. And the journal article is co-written by the students that provides a bit more information, but the feedback has been that it was been quite beneficial in not just appreciating the diversity, the interrelatedness of the SDGs, but a broadening understanding of what we mean by sustainability, and also feeling as though they're having a direct impact on the world outside the classroom. That's it. 5 minutes.
You did it. Thank you, Sebastian. Yeah, wonderful to hear. When I'm listening to you, I think it's a really transdisciplinary experience. Nearly, I don't know how the makeup of your students is, of course, from the backgrounds, but they're all going for social in the social work area. A real direct two-way learning for both the students, I think, who get an experience of engaging with industry, and the experience of the organization you worked with. So wonderful to hear. And also interesting the connections you try to make from listening to you between the different SDGs. So yeah, great to hear about. And yeah, thank you. Karen, over to you.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. How exciting to hear about all of these initiatives. So, and what a hard act to follow. So thanks for having me today. My name's Karen, and I'm a human geographer in the School of Earth and Environmental Sciences here at UQ. So on unceded Yagara and Turrbal land. Over the last 18 months to 2 years, I've been involved in the development of a new flagship course at UQ with Associate Professor Elske van der Vliert. UQ decided that they wanted to create these flagship courses that all undergrads could have the option of taking as an elective, with the potential, as more flagship courses were developed over a number of years, that they would then be requiring undergrads to take at least 2 of them. So only 2 have been developed at the moment, and Elske and I have developed one of those. So it's called Complexity, Action and Sustainable Futures. There's a little bit of delay with UQ approving this bigger edge framework that these flagship courses are sitting within. So it doesn't look like we're going to be running it until early 2023. But which is interesting because Sharon was talking about scale. So the idea is with these flagship courses is that we'll get all these different students coming in with their disciplinary backgrounds and really engaging in the SDG agenda and seeing how they can really contribute to it with their disciplinary expertise and work together on some actual real world problems. But that could be hundreds, likely to be hundreds or even in the thousands of students. So Elske and I really pushed, because we built the course, we really pushed to get it running as a pilot this year. So we've just started on Monday. We have a very small number of students, but that's completely fine for the purposes that we want to be running it as a pilot. And already we're finding errors and things we need to be clear about around assessment. So we're super glad we're doing that with just a really small cohort. The initial brainstorming of ideas for the course centred around what kinds of knowledge and skills UQ undergraduates would need when they go out into the world and use their degrees to contribute to the SDG agenda. To do this, we held 4 participatory workshops. This was back in 2020 when the course was just bubbling away with a few kind of really embryonic ideas. We got 70 people together across these workshops, broadly working in the sustainable development space, students, researchers, government, industry reps, and to explore their ideas and perspectives. And from there, we've really created the course using these 3 overarching blocks. Just really briefly, these 3 blocks around, just briefly mention their content. The first one is to really try and for students to really know the crisis. So it's a little bit like a car crash at times, but they really have to turn and face it, which can actually be really hard and part of that first hurdle. And we're trying to support them in really doing that. So really face it head on. So exploring the shortfall, which is all the stuff obviously around poverty and hunger and deprivation, inequality and injustice. Then also look at the overshoots, so our over and excessive consumption, bringing about climate change, biodiversity loss and environmental degradation. We really draw on the SDGs at that point to create as the lens to really help students face and know that crisis. But early on, we're really pitching that we need transdisciplinary responses to address the crisis. And that's what we're trying to do by bringing in, when it goes full capacity in 2023, we'll have students from all these different disciplines, which will make for such vibrant and well, hopefully vibrant, sometimes maybe conflictual, but hopefully vibrant discussions. The second block is about responding to the crisis. So we start by looking at some of the criticisms. How did we get in this predicament? So looking at the real weaknesses or criticisms at our current system, and look at what's on the table around sustainable future solutions. We ground them in some key principles and methods and frameworks to help us plan for and respond to the crisis and its complexity. And then the third block is about working together in the crisis. And we use 3 thematic modules: humanitarian emergencies, climate change and sustainable energy, and land, food and water and livelihoods, and take an in-depth look at what's been done around the world on those thematic areas, how partnerships work and how they can actually be part of it. The last point I'll make is that we're really conscious that and this has been a thing Elsa and I have tussled with throughout, is that we're really conscious that it's complex and messy and seemingly uncontrollable. This is the crisis that we're all in, and unfixable and quite upsetting. And we know as teaching undergrads and postgrads for decades, having young family members as well, and that this can have such a heavy toll on students and for the younger generation, resulting often in feelings of kind of despair or anger or fear or anxiety. And so we really are also trying to, in this course, as we're supporting them in their learning and in their collaborations, that the importance of hope, but also just not kind of blind hope, but really hoping well. How do we create responsive hope as part of a curriculum? So that's been quite interesting. And I don't know if we're going to get that right, but that's what the pilot's for. But if anyone has ideas around this, we'd love to hear them. So by embedding that kind of responsive hope throughout the course, we've been doing things like creating opportunities for collaboration and working on problem sets with industry partners, which really speaks to what Sharon was saying before, that we become Exhibit A because we're actually negotiating in the classroom with our industry partners on these problems with the students. But working together, we know that that's really important and useful for responsive hope. Creating lots of opportunities for reflection and thinking through personal actions as well. And we're even doing activities where we're simply sitting out in nature in stillness and contemplating. So just trying to use some of those kinds of tools to embed that responsive hope throughout it, to hopefully strengthen their personal hope, but also all the while taking on their own their responsibilities and feeling a sense of empowerment to make a difference. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. I really look forward on how this pilot is going, because what you're in essence doing, I think, is developing the coping skills of the students to deal in the world they live now, but also to what they want to respond in a professional sense. And actually, I'm doing some work myself on that, responding in a VUCA world, and what does this actually mean? So yeah, really interesting. I also would like to come back when you just said this is a small course, and I think for many people here on the call, we can relate that we do have small courses, whether it could be in the curricular space or the co-curricular. And for me, the message on, yes, we need to go in scale, but I also think there is still space. I was just talking to a colleague this morning. In some professional areas, like for lawyers, there is little space for sustainability. The curricula is driven by the associations, etc. And what can we actually offer that those students come really on board? So, I think there is quite a diversity of learning spaces needed for us to get across the university. So that's what was teased for me when you just spoke to the numbers. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, and really hope it goes well. Last but not least, Nancy, over to you.
Thanks, Annette. Hi, everybody. Thanks ever so much for having me to be part of this fantastic initiative. And we just wanted to share with you a bit of work that we did last year to promote SDG 13 and to run a global climate change week at the University of Wollongong. So this initiative has been started and has been going for a few years, actually, by colleagues, academics that are in a couple of our faculties, who each year ran a series of seminars about their research and to try and widen knowledge about climate change and what the university community could do personally and in the wider sense in terms of activism. And a couple of these academics we found out were retiring last year. So the fantastic Belinda Gibbons that's on the call with us, and a colleague, Leah Sherwood, who's in the research office at University of Wollongong. We're on an SDG impact group, and we decided that we'd give it a go. We didn't want it to sort of lapse because our colleagues were retiring, and so we thought we'd stand up Global Climate Change Week. And of course, New South Wales, we were in lockdown. I should have said, I'm coming to you from beautiful Dharawal country. So we were limited in what we could do. We couldn't do the usual gathering on campus, doing tree planting and doing tours and looking at sustainable horticulture. So we had an online Global Climate Change Week. And we, from the start, wanted to try and do what Sharon was talking about at the beginning about involving the whole of institution and our community partners. And also thinking about how we can tap into lots of different kinds of learning, from the personal through to the global and the national. So we got together mainly through our networks. It was a bit chaotic, but we got there in the end. We got some, we got a colleague, Emma Leslie, in communications that did this fabulous website for us. And one of our speakers was an Indigenous artist, and she's also a fabulous climate change warrior, Josie Atkinson, who did that lovely artwork, which is called Heal Country, Heal Climate, that she very generously allowed us to use for Global Climate Change Week. So we wanted to make sure that we were using our academics to showcase research that was happening in terms of climate change, but also what was happening in the institution as a whole. So looking at what we as an institution, what footprint we leave and how we can change it. And we invited panelists from our international campuses. So we had a lovely session with representatives from Dubai and Hong Kong and Malaysia and Australia, all talking about sustainability challenges in our own particular locations. And out of the Global Climate Change Week, one of the things we're really proud of is that we've got a network of sustainability representatives in our campuses that's now come together. So we ran lots of different sessions over a week, and we tried to do showing as well as telling. So we had cookery courses live from colleagues' kitchens that were using locally sourced sustainable products. We had our fabulous student waste warriors that were talking about the community garden that we've got on campus. We've got students that were involved in making a submission to COP26, because it was the week before COP26 was happening. And Josie Atkinson, who did that fabulous artwork that you're looking at, also was part of the Indigenous Peoples Organisation's submission to COP26. So we had that sort of, international flavour, but also local, what you can do on campus and how you can work with our communities. We had colleagues from Wollongong City Council, and somebody from the Disabilities Trust, who's also a fabulous cycle path warrior in the Illawarra, how you can use sustainable nappies for your kids and use transport. So it was a real, I guess what we came to in the end was a really big sort of festival of sustainability. And we had over 200 participants with students, staff, alumni and members of the community and our local council. We increased our media awareness of the issue by 222%, which I can't quite believe. We had about 20 editorial pieces that then had a reach of potentially almost 20 million people, because we managed to get into the national papers. And what started, I guess the message is, what started as just 3 women thinking, we don't want to let this go because it's such a good initiative and let's just see what we can do, using the networks and then coming up with what was a really informative and fun event to be part of. So we're very much hoping that this goes from strength to strength, and we've put a bid in for a resource to help us, because we were absolutely shattered by the end of it. And out of that, as I said, we've got international sustainability networks that weren't there before. We had really robust conversations with our students, who of course are leading the way, saying, why are we not doing sustainability in every subject that we do, not just the courses on sustainability? So it was a good initiative. So I just wanted to share that with everybody. Thanks very much. Hope I haven't gone over time.
No, you're good. And Nancy, thank you very much for sharing that. And it was a wonderful slide, and really impressive, the variety of activities and people involved, and also during a time when people were actually getting tired. I think during COVID, still get so many people online. So yeah, well done. I think in the end you made a comment a little bit towards resources, and maybe that aligns with the question that I got earlier. You know, it's casuals, or sometimes it's not embedded maybe in the working hours of people, and do a lot on the side. Or so yeah, I wanted to know that as well. Thank you all for sharing those wonderful activities. And I've got a couple of questions, but I'm going to start actually with one that I saw popping up, and just general to the panel, because we're doing all those wonderful things in quite, in our spaces of the university, you know, and one answer to the question that popped up was how do we collaborate, or how do we actually all work together on this? And I think this forum is wonderful to bring us together, but could we do anything better, you know, to share some of those things? You know, Nancy, you had that climate week, you know, was it really only with your local partners, you know? And maybe it's very good to do it locally. What do you think? If you look at your own initiatives, is there something that could be done or should be done, or maybe not, you know, to spread the word? Or in an ideal world, how would you like to collaborate with others, other universities?
I can comment on our initiative and how it began. And it was essentially through a sustainability network that we created across the Faculty of Science in the first place, with everybody interested, not just teaching, but research, operations, everyone interested. And then we got together with people in arts, and then we worked on this as a particular project, designing this teaching initiative. But I also really want to endorse what Sharon was saying before, because we are still running a bit on the back foot with this, because we don't have an official location, if you like. We're located in the School of Environment and the Faculty of Science, but we don't have a sustainability centre in which the people who come in to speak, their time is accounted for and allowed for. So it's a little bit of a shoestring, pull it together operation. In my experience, you do that and then you keep nagging the authorities, and eventually they give you what you want, which is a structure and time and resources.
No, and Niki, you're right. Sometimes how do we talk about cross collaboration within universities? Well, you know, within our universities, it's quite a big thing to actually get this established. So yeah, I hear you there. Any further views from the panel?
Yeah, I can, from our point of view, our lovely academic colleagues that started off Global Climate Change Week have also got a network of international colleagues at different universities, including at the moment the University of Tasmania is hosting the online presence. So we also shared initiatives and recordings and outcomes that came out of our Global Climate Change Week with our university partners. So it would be great to sort of grow that a bit bigger. But, you know, come back to what Sharon and yourself, Annette, was talking about before. It is also about resources, and my worry about this is I'm so proud about what we did, and you know, it's something that really galvanizes the whole of the community, academics, non-academics, community partners, alumni, school kids, all want to get involved. But we really need to resource it and put the structures around it so that we can continue it. And it's you know, it's off the back of a more formal recognition. So I think one of the ways we tried to do that is we did a review afterwards, and we used our colleagues in the media team were fantastic about giving us those nice little, you know, or look at the audience reach and everything, with the hope that, you know, then the dollars will follow when you can prove, you know, success and all that sort of thing. So it's about getting the metrics in place as well. Even though you're sort of knackered at the end of doing an initiative like this, it's really worthwhile just sort of sweeping up and doing that kind of review so that you can then try and boost it and get the funding for the next time.
Yeah, and the evidence. And I think, sorry, I hadn't seen this last question around, what can we do that it's appropriately resourced and supported? And I think that's the question that you are looking at now, and especially in the co-curricular space, that can be challenging. And there we are just actually trying to lift some initiatives out of the curricular space into the curricular space. And partly it's also that it then becomes part of the structures with an income and people attached to it. So thank you. Any further comments to this question, Karen?
Yeah, so with our course that we've developed, so Elska and I are in 2 different faculties, and the admin is so complicated, and we're at the same institution and just in different faculties. And trying to work that out actually takes up so much time. I would love to do this kind of teaching and learning with others at other institutions, but I couldn't imagine the headache that would embroil. But it's so unfortunate. Like, we do it in all our research projects. Our institutions have no problems with that and can easily sign, collaborative agreements across institutions that way. Why couldn't we do that in the learning space? So yeah, because I think it's a real missed opportunity there.
I hear you. I was involved in Monash's first cross-faculty Masters on Environment and Sustainability, and it was the first cross-faculty Masters. It is great, but yeah, in terms of administration, there are hurdles, but it can be really done. Sebastian, anything?
Yeah, what we found to be very beneficial is, for us at least, better utilizing existing networks, and that's professional networks, places like this, and couldn't agree more with all the comments around sometimes it takes a couple of just passionate people pushing it through and then raising it. So the reason we started these placements was because of relationships we built in Australia through the International Federation of Social Workers with US-based social workers that had kind of an idea. And then we've been able, through these networks, to talk about this model and support other universities start developing similar models themselves. What that does, at least, means within, I guess, our professional kind of cohort, there is relationship building and networking and pushing it through. It still kind of silos us a little bit, and which is not, goal 17, let alone the fundamental principles of sustainability, that it's a collective issue. The barrier has been, because I guess the model that we're talking about is basically allowing NGOs and you've got students on placements, you've got NGOs, bring those two together. The barrier has been resourcing, because a lot of the opportunities, whether it's, I've had conversations with NGOs, with peak NGO representatives and organizations, but it has been just about the resourcing, because there's all this extra work that kind of goes, as everyone sure on this call is aware of, that goes into the coordination and liaison. So I found it, I think, in terms of the building partnerships, it's using these networks has been incredible. And actually, as a result of this placement, further research partnerships have actually come up as in relation to sort of eco-social appreciation and better supporting, particularly social workers in practice. So it's, yes, a lot of individual work, and there seems to be no kind of clear pathway around how to do all of this.
Yeah. So I hear great excitement on the initiatives, but also, yeah, some barriers regarding resourcing, administration, etc., and yeah, which could impede the ongoing sustainability of these initiatives. Any further barriers that you have experienced within your initiatives that you've overcome?
I think one barrier that is often there with sustainability is the sense amongst people teaching in current programs that we're already doing it. And of course, the SDGs cover everything. So it's not that hard a call. And we've particularly struggled with this around transdisciplinarity. And I really feel like there's a need for further sort of understanding and discussion of what it really means to problem solve with other people and communities, as opposed to sort of getting little bits of knowledge from here and there and piecing them together. So I think it's that inertia in people quite seeing how radical this is potentially. But you overcome that again really with persistence and with, talks and with getting students on board who actually are more up with the play in many ways.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. You're creating your own evidence for what you're doing to help to keep overcoming those barriers. Yeah. Any other?
Yeah, I definitely second what Niki said. About the power of getting students involved, and also then how that translates to getting the higher echelons of the university to listen as well. Having students as partners is a really good way of doing that. And I think, a big challenge is trying to mainstream sustainable development goals instead of seeing it as something nice that we do over here on the side and that these people do over here. It's, and our students get it already. It's, why isn't this part of all the subjects I do, and why can't I sort of see how the themes flow through not just the curriculum, but through my experience on campus and online. And, so I think, a big challenge is trying to get it mainstreamed. And one of the solutions, I think, is using our fabulous students to sort of as a really powerful voice.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Sebastian, I've got a question for you. You said just now your initiative has also led to new research collaborations. Within what we're doing, what is the link actually between research and fantastic research that's done in many areas of sustainability and getting that back into our education and to keep that link really warm? Any experiences? And I can see different things. Sebastian, you just spoke to it from your initiative to the research. Karen, is research currently really underpinning why you established this course? What is the link there?
I think for us, what's been and continues to be really powerful is to be able to document and share what people are doing. And I think something, and I couldn't agree with everyone just said previously, and especially what Niki mentioned, because it's the main barrier that we had, which is people just look at it and go, yeah, of course, we're doing sustainability. Yeah, we're doing goal 6, it's great. As opposed to then, and the studies we're looking into is basically, well, social workers have been dealing with increased natural disasters for decades, and also have been part of community development strategies. Yet, if we're not able to document that, if we're not able to share it, and we're not able to really capture it as not just a way of better understanding, but also provide better guidance to the next generation of social workers and existing social workers around when you are, you may feel as though access to clean water may not be an issue because you're a social worker in Melbourne CBD. But access to clean water is actually a significant issue in many parts of Australia, and it is fundamentally a social justice issue. And here is how it's being addressed by social workers that you may have no contact with. So we're finding the power of research, which I'm stating the obvious, but it has really been both about better understanding what we're doing and at the same time provide better direction around how to deal with it. And I think just coming back, because something when we were doing the placement with the students, and it's in part of what they shared in the journal article we wrote, they brought a lot of both grief and eco-anxiety around the enormity of the issues that we're dealing with and not necessarily knowing where to start. And something like the placement, which is basically, and part of the research that we're doing is, well, here are tangible steps that social workers are doing or that you can do or other professionals are doing or other groups are doing. And the feedback has been, at least it provided a bit of action and a bit of focus around and channeling some of those frustrations and anxieties through something more kind of forward focused. So that's kind of been our focus at the moment.
No, great. And that last part really talks about some agency that people can have in this process. Yeah, anyone else would like to share on the link between research and evidence and your initiative? No? Sorry, I just put myself on hold. I did it. Oh, so good. We still all do it. If you think about your initiatives and the factors that made it become alive, because we talked about, some of the barriers you've overcome, what is the #1 factor that made it happen, because, you know, it's unique in its own right and in your own place. Karen, can I start with you?
I think it's the same kind of similar ilk to what others were saying in the panel before, and it really does come down to who you're working with and them having heaps of energy as well and passion. Like you might not be, you come from different perspectives. Like ELSCA is really about pushing that transdisciplinary, getting students trained in and understanding of, and how do we put that in practice in dealing when we have industry partners and we're working with them on problem sets with students from different disciplinary backgrounds. How do we really listen and take on board? And whereas my piece is a little bit different in the course, it's more about facing it and stepping into it and taking action and being hopeful as you're doing that and being empowered. So we almost needed both halves of that. But if ELSCA didn't have huge amounts of drive and passion, but then there's others around us as well. We've brought in experts, industry partners being involved. So it has to just be people's level of commitment and passion to go on this journey with you.
Hey, thank you. Any other big factors?
I would like to add looking really carefully within your institution for the structural opportunities. So we had these new things called modules, which were these 3 courses. And so we thought, we could do a module. So we, if you like, piggybacked on an institutional structure in order to put forward what we did. I mean, reinforcing Karen, though, it created people, but also keeping your eye out so you're not banging your head against too many brick walls, but looking for those openings, I think.
Thanks, Niki. I certainly realized that it's already time. Nancy, could you contribute very short, or are you happy if we are going to?
I'm fine. I was just going to say that from what Karen had said about the people and networks, and just, you know, always having an eye to diversity. So, you know, have we got our international colleagues? Are we talking to our regional campuses? What about Indigenous knowledges, and how can they contribute, and how are we showcasing them? So yeah, just think about diversity and use your fabulous people like Belinda and Leah.
Yeah, thanks all for sharing. I really hope that the audience has also enjoyed this session. To my panel members, thank you so much for making this together. And of course, to our keynote speaker who set the scene. Tahl, back to you.
Thank you very much, Annette, and thank you to all the speakers in both the sessions. I had so many questions that I wanted to keep talking about, but obviously we were running a bit out of time. We are wondering whether you still have things on your mind, and would really love to hear from you about what is still on your mind. Is there anything you're thinking about at the end of the forum in response to either one of the sessions that we had today around these really transformative approaches to education, around scaling up, around networks, around the concept of a sustainability repository website and how that's going to help? We really would love to hear from you. So I have posted a link in Mentimeter for you to use, or you can scan this QR code that is on the screen at the moment. And that would really help us think about what happens next, and I guess also share the outcomes with the group more broadly. Also around sharing the outcomes, as we said, if people want to receive an email with the follow-up information, you will need to let us know. So I will post that also in the chat now, a form for you to register. Otherwise, I just want to share, just to say again, thank you so much. I learn a huge amount every time I hear from people, and it gives me a lot to think about in my own work. So I hope it's the same for everyone. And we hope you'll be able to join us as well tomorrow for the final session of this forum, which will actually delve a lot more deeply into one area around climate change education. Very topical at the moment. We know it's being discussed across lots of universities and other higher education institutions. So do please join us tomorrow. Thank you very much. Oops, and I forgot to share. Thanks.